Welcome to Unfiltered, real conversations with creators, tastemakers, movers, and shakers. I'm Kristen Hess of the Artful Gourmet podcast, and this is where we pull back the curtain on creativity, business, and the stories behind the people shaping culture today. So grab a coffee or pour a glass of wine, and let's sit down and talk. This is Unfiltered. Hey guys, welcome to Unfiltered. This is where we have movers, shakers, creators, tastemakers, entrepreneurs, and the people that are shaping the world in business today. I have a really special guest today. His name is Matthew Eklund, founder of MA Selections Private Advisory and creator of Two Tuxedos Awesome Wine brand. It's an award-winning, sustainable, vegan Sauvignon Blanc that blends luxury, storytelling, hospitality, and emotional connection in a way that feels incredibly personal. Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the show. How are you
Hi.
today?
Hi, Kristen. I'm very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on board.
Yes, and I love your friends, Kitty, my friend Michelle. Hello.
This
Like
is
I
Ragnar.
That
Yeah.
is Ragnar. He's so sweet. I love him. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited about our conversation today, and I'm hearing a little bit more about Two Tuxedos wine. And yeah, I know we're here to just talk about the brand and all kinds of fun stuff you got going on. So I want to just start off the show, talk a little bit more about you and your background and what you're working on and what's next and all that good stuff. So let's dive in to the early beginnings and entering the wine world and how that's all about. So I know you started in luxury branding and hospitality with L'Oreal before you got into the wine world. What originally drew you into the luxury experience and client psychology?
That's a very, very good question. Thank you very much. So
Sure.
actually, the early beginnings of all that came from my training at L'Oreal. Interesting enough, it was back in the day when, before Groupon had hit the London market. So we were we represented hair salons. I trained as a stylist with Vidal Sassoon originally for a short period of time, and
Cool.
realized I wasn't a very good hairstylist. So anyway, I ended up going on the sales team,
Okay.
and we would literally represent salons that were opening. And then what we would do is, as part of L'Oreal's package, we would essentially deck them out with all of their product, with all of their, POS and training and those kinds of things as well. And then we would go and find clients in London who would go to those salons. And they were always in central London. They always had to be in, around Mayfair, Covent Garden, Leicester Square, those kind of areas. So
Mhm.
we would do that, and we would literally go and find the clients. And so right from the beginning, from a very young age, I was 18 at the time when I first started working for L'Oreal. I literally learned immediately how to position myself and represent very high-end luxury salons. For a brief period, we represented Nikki Clark. There was Asghar Mustafa in Mayfair, Trevor Sorby, all of these big names,
Yeah.
Antonio and Guy Mascolo, Tony and Guy,
Them.
Rush Academy, for example. And then it was obviously Vidal Sassoon as well. So we had this wonderful wing of top stylists in England that we were representing. Oh, Daniel Hirschison as well, the Queen's hairdresser. So yeah, and so that's how it started. And then as the hairdressing industry changed when Groupon came to town, that was when I decided I wanted to try something else. And by mode of happy accident in Dubai at that time, I went to Dubai to open the world's first L'Oreal hair salon.
It's awesome.
I learned a little bit about wine through a very big mistake over a client dinner, which cost me a lot of money. And so then I figured, okay, I must learn. I have to learn about wine. That's very important. So then when I came back to London and the industry changed, that's when I got into the wine business. And it was with a company called Oddbins that was nationwide, but they
Hmm.
were known for having these rare, bin ends essentially every month.
Okay.
And those bin ends, it'd be sort of a one-time drop. You'd never see these wines again, but they would come in, and so the clientele was sort of more drawn towards the more curious finds that you would find every week or something. And we had our own little tasting club. So they paid for all my exams, my WSET
Nice.
exams, and then from there, then I became a sommelier at that point, and then
Cool.
I, moved on into the industry from there. So I was immediately catapulted from L'Oreal to working with a national store chain that was all over the country and had a
Yeah.
great reputation, great education as well, and then became an assistant sommelier to Zuma in London, in
Okay.
Knightsbridge. And so that's where the fine wine side of things began.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, not to talk about me, but I did get a certificate in food and wine pairing at the
Oh, wow.
International Culinary Center, and it was a pre-sommelier course.
Wow.
It was like 4 or 5 weeks, but it was really cool. Like, I was always into food, but I didn't know a ton about wine, and they took us through all of it, where all the different grapes come from and paired food with wine and different types of tasting. We learned everything about it. And actually, one of my favorite pairings was port and
Oh, wow.
Stilton,
Yes, of course.
right? I mean,
Yes.
who
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
thought? And I don't even like sweet wine, but the whole like pungent, sharp, tangy cheese with the
Sure.
sweet wine. Oh my God. And then, of course, fried chicken and champagne. Hello.
Wow.
Or
Wow.
potato chips and champagne, right?
Yes, of course.
But anyway, so that's really cool that you're into wine because I love, love, love wine and I love Sauvignon Blancs and I love cats because I have two of my own cats. So you're the perfect guest for me on this show. So
It's great. Yeah.
okay, so you talked a little bit about that part of getting into the wine. Was there a specific bottle, dinner, or moment where wine stopped being a product and became something emotional or philosophical for you?
Okay, very, very good question. Thank you. So, yes, there was a time where it did. And I think it really was when initially it was in Dubai. I literally at a L'Oreal client dinner put my finger on the wine list, thinking I was ordering a $60 bottle of wine. But I actually ended up ordering an $870 bottle of wine.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
didn't know. So when the sommelier brought over the bottle, I said, yep, 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 it's fine. It's perfect. Great. Yep, exactly. I didn't know what I was looking for, but
Yeah.
I was young and aggressive and, and very, very, very just young, essentially.
Yeah.
And obviously they wouldn't pay for that bottle of wine
Oh,
as a company, so I had to pay for the bottle of wine, obviously. So point is that at that point I realized, okay, well, I really have to learn about this. But the magic behind it was when I actually learned what I selected. I selected Chateau Clerc Milan 2001, which is the third wine of Chateau Mouton Rothschild. So if you're familiar with the five main Chateau X in Bordeaux, Chateau Mouton Rothschild is one of those.
okay.
And they're one of the most expensive wines in the world. So I think
Mm.
now on average it's about $3,500 to $4,000 a bottle
Oh my
per
goodness.
vintage when it's released. So yeah, I ordered their third wine, which was expensive, but it was a good year rather. And so then when I started to learn what I'd actually ordered, because when I tasted the wine, it was so complex and it wasn't what I had previously been exposed to,
Hmm.
especially in London. London at the time was very closed in terms of the market. It was nowhere near as vibrant and free and open as the US market, more importantly, New York's market for wine actually is. It was a very, very closed industry. So there were really five companies that were controlling the alcohol importation and distribution in the United Kingdom at that time. And so anyway, so yeah, so when I learned more about it and I thought, okay, wow, this is really, really interesting. Then I learned the history and there was a really good book called War and Wine. And I forget who wrote it. I think it was Mark Rothberg or something like that. But anyway, so he basically had documented all of the heroic Second World War and First World War stories with these famous champagne growers and also Chateau X
Cool.
in Bordeaux, etc., and what they actually went through during times of war, obviously in Europe. And it was so fascinating because then you're learning about the sort of the triumphs, the trials and tribulations, and the real abject difficulties that these families actually had to go through in order to just survive. But then also on top of that, their own family history.
Yeah.
And, for example, why you see the name Veuve on many, many different champagne bottles, and there's many, many Veuve X in France. And just purely because, during the First World War, a lot of the male population were deceased. They were killed on the front lines in the trenches.
Mm.
So the Veuve X, the women, the widows of the lineage and the houses, essentially, those families continued those businesses. And that's why they rebranded to Le Veuve Clicquot. Le
Which I
Veuve
love.
Pommeret, exactly, so that's
Cool.
one of the reasons why. So anyway, there's so much more to it and so much more wonderful history than just consuming the bottle. So I think that's how I'd answer that question on that front.
Okay.
That's the romance behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's super interesting. And yeah, Veuve Clicquot is one of my favorites. I used to live in St. Pete, and there was
this really cool champagne bubbles bar, and it's right on Beach Drive. And every like Wednesday night, they would do like $25 bottles.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
yeah, I know. And
Of
we would
Veuve
go,
Clicquot.
yes, it was like for 2 hours, like a happy hour special every Wednesday night. And then we would go
Wow.
with a big group of people, and they had cool couches outside and fire pits, and we would get like just buckets and buckets of them,
It's
like
amazing.
why
Wow.
not, right? $25. Right? I know. That's the best wine ever.
That's amazing.
I
Wow.
know.
Now
I don't
that's
know
a
if they still
glass,
do
isn't it?
that.
That's one glass, $25. That's
I
exactly what it goes
know.
for.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, we talked a little bit about the emotional, philosophical thing. At what point did you realize that you didn't want to just sell wine, but you wanted to build brands and experiences around it?
Yeah. So actually, interestingly enough, so my journey was a little bit unorthodox. So I've seen every side of the industry, from working on the retail sector to being a sommelier to being a delivery boy. That's how I started. And also to working in warehouse and then working in the wholesale side of the industry in New York City. So then opening my own importation company nearly 10 years ago now. So the various different aspects of it provided a very, very unique insight into the global wine industry as it is, and obviously informed where I am now with the business and the new direction that the business has taken. When people get into food and wine, usually it's at the wonderful romantic side of it, where it's a real love for food and wine,
Yes.
and that's really the core of what it should be. As I evolved from being a lover of food and wine to then becoming a sommelier and working on restaurant side and dealing with corporate restaurant metrics and buying budgets, inventories, dollar value, those kinds of things, and the supply side in two major markets within the world, London and also in the United States, New York City for more specifically, and then obviously going and working on the wholesale side, pulling a bag and building a $1.2 million territory in the first year of business. That then informed at each stage how I viewed the industry, but also how I evolved out of certain early infatuations that I may have had with wine itself. So, and this is a good time to segue into this, because this is something that is very, very, and I think it's something we were going to bring up and discuss anyway. But I had to stop drinking during 2019 because unfortunately it was becoming very unhealthy being around all of this and visiting my customers, restaurants, and drinking 6 nights a week, those kinds of things, and
Yeah.
doing that in order to build business and grow business. It took a toll on the body and it took a toll, in other areas. So for me now, it's been 6.5 years and I've not had a drink anymore. So
That's great.
running the business where you make that conscious decision, and there are many of us who are sober within the wine industry. And who do not drink. Many sommeliers as well out in California. There was a Wine Spectator did a big article on this about a year ago, and they
Okay.
interviewed the top sommeliers in the country and wine buyers that were sober.
Mm.
And it was very interesting. So normally it's very, very difficult to remain in the business because you're not able
Yeah.
to have that affinity or, participate in the activities you normally would do in order to beget more business.
Right.
So what I found myself doing at each different stage of this growth and evolution was I found myself weaning away from actually enjoying my own products and enjoying who I represented. And actually, as an importer, when I founded my own importation company, when I started to understand margins and distribution and inventory, cash flow, and also because all of this was self-taught, nobody assisted me with my own education into becoming a wine importer.
Yeah.
I just decided to go and do it and was given some very good advice that I should go and do it. And so I did. But what happened along the way was one had to learn exactly how a business is run and what happens when you steal from yourself. Okay.
Mm.
And in that respect, and when
Yeah.
you consume and imbibe, there are margins involved. So, restraint became a big part of my
Yes.
business philosophy anyway, at least. That's where I think one sort of ended up. And so the wonderful side of this now is that it's amazing the sense memory that one can have from all the years of studying and training and, being a sommelier and having that sensory reliance, especially it's like exactly the same as fragrance, working in
Yes.
perfume and fragrance.
Yep.
So exactly the same sort of thing, it's amazing. Michelle and I'll go out, I'll take her out and we'll go and I'll order for her. And I'm like, oh, what do you think? And she'll go, oh, it's delicious. It's fantastic. And I smell it and I go, oh, yeah, it's pretty good. I was spot on. Or,
Yeah.
or it's like, oh, that's actually a really, really good one. Because at this point, this many years in the wine industry, which is nearly 20 now, you see the same things. You know what a textbook Moscow Filero from Greece or Sittico, from Santorini should actually taste like, for
Mm.
example, or smell like, and what good Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon from Rutherford, should,
Yeah.
that kind of depth that it should have.
Yeah.
So I think that now, in terms of philosophy and where I align anyway, at least with it, it's one of those things where it's amazing the knowledge that one's acquired and the ability to be able to enjoy the knowledge and knowing about this in such an advanced level of study based on experience, and
Right.
also knowing producers that I've worked with along the way, people I've met who are doing wonderful things in the wine industry, and being more involved in that and being able to appreciate that. And so the segue to my own brands came actually during the pandemic. I'd started the Gentleman's Match, which was a Cabernet Sauvignon from California in
Okay.
2017. And that was doing very well, but the margins weren't there. During the pandemic, I was approached by a Chilean winery that said, we can give you something much better that's cleaner and vegan. And I was vegan at that point. It's when I'd
Mm-hmm.
just gone vegan. So it was really in line with my own philosophies and where I was changing the direction of the business. So then I said, okay, well, how much are we talking? And they told me the price. And I said, wow, okay. All right. Well, that's not California. So that's amazing. That's good.
Yeah.
And a good example was it had a wax top on the top of
Mm.
the bottle. Wax top in California was $60 a case to
Wow.
dip. In Chile, it was $5 a
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it just made more sense to go down to Chile. So then I transferred the project down to Chile. And then when the pandemic happened, we'd grown to having 53 different wineries on our portfolio. We were known for Serbian wine. We were known for Austrian, Argentinian, Greek wine. I had Armenian wine at one point. We had great French portfolio. We were adding Spanish. We had Romanian that we were about to bring on board as well. And then the pandemic happened. And so at that point, I learned that the margins were not clear across the board. And unfortunately, during that time, everybody panicked. So there was a lot of panic in the industry. And there was very much uncertainty because of our federal
Right.
3-tier system.
Right.
So it was very, very difficult to just navigate through that when everything was shut down. And in PA, the PLCB shut us down for 3 months. So
Mm.
during that time, there were no liquor sales
Yeah.
from small suppliers. Only the liquor stores where the state was able to sell product. So we had to revise everything. And I was on my own at that point. And I scaled right back. And I thought, okay, what do I need to do to move forward? And I thought, now's the time to create your own brands. That's what you have to do, because
Right.
those can't be taken away from you. That's your product, your label,
Right.
your project. You decide exactly how the wine is made.
Right.
You decide the quality, you decide the integrity. And then one was doing the same work for other people's wines. So I figured, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do it for myself. And so then I created a couple more brands, and then fast track throughout the years, we get to 2024. And that's when we brought out Two Tuxedos. And basically, Two Tuxedos was the winner. It's the brand that has done the most, the best,
Right.
because of obviously Morris and Tora and their contribution. And basically, no, it's gone very, very fast. So we've gone all over the country with it.
Yeah. And Morris and Tora, I love that you created this based on your cats. They have really become like the emotional heartbeat of your brand. So tell us about
Absolutely.
them.
Morris and Tora, lovely, beautiful creatures. Morris has a very human quality to him,
Okay.
and very soulful. 16 years old,
Aw.
filled with life,
Yeah.
and absolutely beautiful. Tora unfortunately passed in 2025,
I'm
last year,
sorry. Yeah.
almost a year now, and very sudden. And interestingly enough, the vets didn't know categorically or with any certainty exactly why.
Oh, wow.
And No, and so I for various reasons I believe that there's a little higher purpose behind all of this and a bit more of a significant meaning.
Yeah.
But no, she was absolutely wonderful. They were both very very sweet and they really did inspire everything. The reason why is because you know this obviously just as much as I do, but cats are very very unique. Dog lovers have a very very unique connection with their
Yeah.
dogs, with their dogs. But cats are very very they're very they see the future. Okay, they're very very protective of their owners
Yes.
in a very special way.
Yes.
Not in a way that is normal that you would see normally, in human interactions necessarily. There's an
Hmm.
undevoted loyalty and there's an
Yes.
undevoted sense of love and affection that comes from cats, and I would say dogs also as well, but more so with cats,
Yeah.
where they just by sitting on our chests or sitting in our arms,
Yeah.
when we're just passing time or spending
Yeah.
time with them, they're just able to console, to bond, to show their warmth and their love in
Yes.
an unrequited way. So
Absolutely.
that was the main emotional, pull to do something with them.
Yeah.
And also, there was a gentleman in California named David Loop, and it's the Sierra Paws Rescue Clinic. And he's self funding this, and I really admire him. But I always wanted to try to do something with him and get the brand to a point where we could definitely sponsor him permanently
Yeah.
as long as the brand was continuing. But he will go out he's in Southern California and literally just rescue animals in
Wow.
distress, cats in
I
distress
love that.
mainly. And he does wonderful things. His Instagram account is excellent, and you'll see in real time exactly what he does. But he was also very inspiring too. And I just thought, is there possibly a way that we can do something through the sale of the wine product to help them? Because they always need funding. And I think those were the conversations I started to have early on
Yeah.
when we were putting, all of this together and thinking about it in a greater detail.
So a portion of each bottle goes to that charity?
Yes, so we've made some
Okay.
donations to
Okay.
uh, to David. Now, obviously, that the project is coming to an end, it's
Yeah.
winding down.
Yeah.
The goal is to donate to a few charities as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially in the New York City area, and in California as well with David, and then
Hmm.
just further around the country as well, just to support everybody, all nonprofits that are
Yeah.
helping rescue cats, and rehabilitate. I think more importantly, because Morris had 5 owners
Oh, wow.
before me. Yeah, yeah, Morris had 5, and
Which cats don't like moving around, so that must have been a
no,
big
and
toll.
exactly, and
Yeah.
just seeing some of the little nuances and things that would traumatize him, and
Yeah.
just helping him work through those, that was very, very important. So I think the rescuing is a very, very, very important aspect of what we can do anyway, at least when
Yeah.
giving homes to these wonderful feline babies that we
Yeah.
have.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay. The branding, I don't know, it feels like playful, but it's also like elevated and emotionally
Mm.
resonant. Like, how do you balance like accessibility with luxury? So it's sort of like a fun, down to earth brand, but it's also kind of a luxury brand. How do you
Sure. How do we do that? So basically,
balance that?
yeah, how do we balance it? We always, so when I started MA Selections, I always wanted to make sure that the quality of the wines exceeded the price. That was the mandate. That was always the
Yeah.
philosophy. So the price, the barriers to entry were always removed
Hmm.
because the pricing was always just $1 or 2 less than a national brand that was on the market at that point. And so with Two Tuxedos, the way Two Tuxedos entered was it was super competitive for Chile. But it wasn't Gato Negro, it wasn't Casillero del Diablo, and it certainly wasn't Chono. It was either just a little bit more expensive in New York City, for example, because of New York City pricing. And in New Jersey, it sat directly on the mark with Chono as a wine brand. Chono is known for being sustainable.
Hmm.
I don't believe they're vegan, but they were known for being sustainable, and the quality of their wines are very, very good, and they were relatively small production compared to Casilla del Diablo. So the luxury aspect was that it's independently owned, and it's not owned by mega conglomerate,
Yeah.
Constellation Brands or
Yep.
Pernod Ricard or Contiatore. So the fact of the matter was that, we still had control over it, and it was being built from the ground up. And, and I would actively go out to the liquor stores in New Jersey and in New York City as well and pour the product and actually engage with consumers
Yeah.
and
I love
tell them
that.
the story, etc. And I'd be
Mhm.
there. So 5 days a week I was on the road for the most part doing tastings between New York City and New Jersey and DC. That was
Okay.
really the territory that we were bouncing around, and obviously PLCB in Pennsylvania at all of the
Yeah.
state stores there that we were working with. So yeah, that's and the nice thing was that, so in Pennsylvania it entered as a luxury brand. Ironically enough, that's the
Okay.
category that it entered,
Yeah.
luxury brand. And so as a luxury item, it was placed at the fine wines and good spirits
Okay.
luxury stores.
Yeah.
So those were the flagship stores that we could boast. So you're definitely on the mark when you say luxury.
Yeah.
And also the actual cases, the shippers themselves, they were bright yellow with Morris and
Mhm.
Tora. And the branding, the whole point of the branding was that we took Morris and Tora essentially on this romantic journey. Two kitties who are best of friends going from the Chilean Andes all the way around
I
up to
love
New
it.
York City. So we actually have the postmarks. If you see over here, the camera, there's actually a post
Yes.
stamp, and it's but on the actual shippers themselves,
I love
which are on the
that.
website,
So, yeah.
we
Oh,
have them going from the sorry, because we have them going
no,
from
I was
the
gonna
the
say, do you have
Andes.
little videos of these on your site that people can see,
And so there's photographs of the
or
shippers,
photos?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's photographs of the shippers, but
Cool.
basically it was Morris and Tora, and we were working on animating them,
Okay.
which was interesting. We were working on animating them, but it became a little tricky because the graphic designer that we worked with, she was amazing. She
Yeah.
works for Disney Pixar. And
Okay.
so she did
Cool.
all of this, and this was all hand drawn, Morris and
Yeah.
Tora. So it was drawn based on their
I love it.
likeness. Yeah. And we were working to try and animate, but it's a very complex process.
Right.
And it's not something that AI was able to, at the time, 2 years
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
do accurately, 100%. So
Right.
it needed some real specialist graphics design in videography to be able to do this, and motion graphics
Yeah.
capture to be able to do it. So we didn't quite finish that side, but the stamps on the cases show the Chilean Andes, Morris and Tora in the Chilean Andes, and
Okay.
then it shows the Panama Canal as another
I love it.
stamp,
I
and then
love it.
then it was, where was it? It was Washington D.C., the Capitol building, and then
That's
we
so
had obviously
fun.
Philadelphia, and then we
Yeah.
had New York City. And as we were actually starting to look for international distribution,
Mm.
so we started Japan, we started Thailand, we started China as well, actually, which is very complex to navigate.
Yeah.
But literally, as one was looking for distribution in these markets, essentially, the goal was to add key tourist attractions or tourist sites as a stamp based on the
Yeah.
market that we would
I
enter
love
into.
it.
So we create new cases for those markets and shippers and everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really cool. But it was a very,
Yeah.
very cool. We had, yeah, there's some very, very good ideas behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my background's creative and advertising and all that, so I'm fascinated. I love the labeling and the colors and the little caricatures of them and everything. So let's talk about the actual wine
Sure.
itself. Like,
Yes.
if you could describe the taste, like, what are the notes? How is it different from a Sauvignon Blanc in Marlborough, New Zealand versus a Sauvignon Blanc from California versus a Sauvignon in France? Like, tell us about the wine and the taste and the notes and all that good stuff.
Great. And Tristan, something you'll be able to confirm when I say this. Hi, Ragnar. Is Hello, Ragnar. Do you want to say hello?
Hello,
There you go. Perfect.
cutie.
The you'll be able to confirm and attest to is, so those sites are all very, very unique in terms of how
Hmm.
the soil is structured, the terroir. And when I say terroir, obviously we're talking about the French. It's the French. It's almost idiomatic
The
as a
earth.
word, as a noun, I guess, in this case,
Yes.
or adjective, but it's a little bit more. It's the actual site itself. So the
Hmm.
pH of the soil.
Yep.
It's the gradient. It's the number of hours of number of photo hours that the site gets. It's the diurnal range. So it's the average temperature, the mean temperature, basically throughout the
Hmm.
entire year, day and night, averaged out. So, and then also there's other aspects like, wind, for example, and then it's how you train the vines. So that in French, they encompass it all into one word known as terroir.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what it is. So Calistoga in California, which is where most of the Sauvignon Blanc is grown, Chateau Montelena is up there, and they do very, very good Sauvignon Blanc. But the Calistoga area is where you get more of a Bordeaux style Sauvignon Blanc. So it has a little bit more density in the body.
Okay.
It's rounder. The acidity is a little softer. In Calistoga in California. In Bordeaux, it's very, very unique because in Bordeaux, there really isn't 100% Sauvignon Blanc. That comes from the Loire Valley, so around Sancerre, Touraine, and also the Val de Loire. In Bordeaux, they blend with Semillon and also Muscadel, which is, those are the three grape varietals that Bordeaux Blanc uses.
Okay.
So when Bordeaux whites, they're predominantly Sauvignon Blanc, but there's a nice pear freshness that you get, which comes from Semillon, and a little like a lychee sort of fragrance, which comes from Muscadel.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, this is something that is indicative of the New Zealand wine industry that unfortunately consumers are now starting to move away from, and which is fortunate as well. And that informed our decision to make a wine that was not as scorching and racing in acidity as New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Very grassy.
Right, exactly. So the grassiness is indicative of the soil type. In Marlborough, it's a very, very unique soil. And obviously, it's a volcanic region. So there's also that component too. It's more alkali rich. With Sauvignon Blanc, because it's so temperamental, if you use the wrong kind of vessel to mature the wine, so such as American oak, for example, American oak is known for giving a coconut sort of tobacco-esque finish on red wine.
Okay.
And instead of vanilla, it's dried coconut is usually the essence. French oak gives vanilla, cocoa powder, and eucalyptus notes. That's what it's known for, which is why the top Bordeaux chateaus use new oak, because it's their style.
Okay.
You don't put Sauvignon Blanc traditionally into oak. If you do, you soften the acidity and it becomes rounder and it becomes heavier and it takes on that oaky profile that we talk about. Whereas New Zealand style is stainless steel fermentation and stainless steel maturation, for the one reason that it's fresh, crisp, clean, ready to go, and it's anaerobic fermentation. And by that, I mean that there's no oxidative fermentation. You don't get that bready champagne brioche nose on the Chardonnay champagnes like Krug, Runat, or Laurent Perrier, for example. You get something very crisp, very clean, very fresh, very bright. And so New Zealand is known for its green apple, passion fruit, pineapple noses. In Wairarapa. In Marlborough, it's known for Granny Smith apples, but also passion fruit as well. Okay. And that's the nose. Very, very zippy. It has like a wet rock minerality. There's just something damp and humid about it, but also that grassiness. It makes it very green. When you close your eyes, you imagine green. You know, there's the color.
Totally.
The way winemakers adjust acidity in commercial winemaking is to use tartaric acid. And I'm against that for the one reason that that's where the heartburn comes from. When you have 2 glasses of Oyster Bay, wonderful brand, amazing.
I love Oyster Bay, I know, but I've gotten that like, you know, like right here.
Or even Kim Crawford.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know, but Kim Crawford is a man.
I didn't know that, but I love Kim Crawford.
Kim Crawford, yes, he's a man.
Okay.
And this is excellent marketing, by the way. But anyway, so Kim Crawford, you notice because of the mass production, and they have to, because of the number of the sheer volume they produced, to get the consistency across the board, they have to use the same amount of tartaric acid in order to get the finish they're looking for.
Okay.
So with us, because it's a small production project, it comes from Chile, in Santiago, outside of Santiago, in the Maule Valley, which is where the grapes come from, and also one parcel was from Casablanca Valley as well. So the wine, for the most part, is quite like Bordeaux. It's kind of like Pomerol, which Pomerol is known for its clay soils. And Chile has really good consistency year to year. There is one of the only sites left in the world now that has consistency, and they don't have to do very much to adjust it. So for us, the grape varietals, the grapes actually smell very, very much in terms of bouquet and floral notes when fermented, like New Zealand. It's very, very similar. The only difference is there's just a little bit more body purely because there's more clay soil. Whereas in New Zealand, you have volcanic rock
Okay.
and you igneous rock, and you also have limestone, which is excellent for Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
Chile, we're growing on clay. So there's just a little bit of a rounder, denser profile. But the nice thing is we've got the natural acidity of Sauvignon Blanc. We're not adding adjustments.
Right.
And what comes with that also as well is because the fruit that I sourced and paid for is premium fruit from premium vineyards.
Right.
It's not mass grown, mass irrigated. They're certified sustainable. So that means that they're not flooding the vineyards, day and night with water hoses and
Right.
essentially irrigating the soils just to pump out grape after grape after grape. This actually is, there are older vines in commercial winemaking that we use, and they're not subject to the irrigation techniques that are used in mass production. So the quality is intact, the complexity is there, and the nose on Two Tuxedos is very, very unique. It has a really, really, really unique sort of peach apricot nose. You get your hints of green apple, but it certainly doesn't have that grassiness that you get from New Zealand.
Yeah.
There's just something very, very magical. It's almost like some of the Japanese sakes that are produced. There's like a floral note to it,
Yeah.
which is absolutely beautiful. And that was actually picked up by Stephen Zahodnik from the International Wine Report when he rated it 92 points. It had a very, very unique floral character to it.
Yeah.
So that's that's essentially the style of the Two Tuxedos, and again with a nice dense round body. The wet rock component that you get in New Zealand, we still have that there. There's a nice azure minerality, very, very, very beautiful. The same kind of minerality you get in Chablis because the vineyards are very pebble oriented, and to some degree we have that in Chile as well in the Maule Valley. But yeah, and the finish is nice and long. It's not overwhelming. It's not acerbic like, a lot of the New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs tend to be.
Yeah.
Dylan Moran, the Irish comedian, joked at one point that you could clean submarines with the acidity of some of those wines.
Yes.
And that literally is, the barnacles jump back into the ocean, and so literally, I mean, that's how racy and how steely a lot of these wines can be from New Zealand.
Yeah.
They're delicious, they're great. But the nice thing is when you're not using those adjustments, the body tastes the wine and how clean it actually is in comparison because we're not using those adjustments.
Yeah. No, I love that your brand is vegan and organic, sustainable, and all that kind of stuff.
That's actually a good segue as well about veganism. So what makes a wine vegan? And that's something to explain too. So in winemaking, we use egg white isinglass, which is from sturgeon. It's a sturgeon intestine to balance pH level.
Okay.
Egg white is used to bind, it's a binding agent to bind dead yeast colloids. So when the yeast ferments and it dies, the sugar plus the yeast converts the wine into alcohol. So once those burn off, essentially, and the sugar burns off, you achieve the alcohol percentage you're looking for, and then the yeast particles die, the colloids float around. And it's too expensive to use a micron filter to centrifuge the actual yeast out. And also they're quite fine as well. So for every time you use centrifugation, it bends the filter membrane, and that actually it costs about $1,000 per filter plate. So it's no longer cost effective for winemaking.
Yeah.
For very premium Bordeaux X and Napa Valley Cabernet, if that's the style, then yes, you use it. But usually it's albumin that's used. Well, we discovered that green pea powder does a much better job of binding the colloids together. So we use that.
Yeah.
And what it also does on the red wine is it actually softens the acidity. So it creates this very nice silkiness. And going back to the conversation, the question about luxury, that's another point. The quality of the wine far exceeds the price. And that was the whole goal behind it. So we invested in using higher quality product. I contracted with Benoit Fitte, who's from Sancerre. He's our winemaker in Chile, master of Sauvignon Blanc, master of the Chilean terroir. And Benoit really knows what he's doing. And that's why the signature. When he saw the concept for Two Tuxedos, he knew exactly what he had to do, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. And he really
Yeah.
invested a lot of work, and everybody at the winery invested a lot of work to make sure the project came to fruition the way that it needed to. But that's a very, very good point. And then casein is also found as well, which is their enzyme within cheese,
Yeah.
and gelatin
Okay.
is also a filter agent. So we use green pea powder for filtration. Carrot protein was used for the Sauvignon Blanc because it doesn't affect the acidity, and that was used as a fining agent. So in order to actually balance pH levels, the carrot protein worked perfectly on that front. And
That's
so
so
that's
cool.
the main difference with vegan winemaking versus conventional.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so cool. And so you said you got into veganism. What was part of your decision to go that route? And, when you started making wine, did you decide you were going to make all of your wines vegan, or was it something you came into later in your career?
Yes, so actually, very, very good point. So I actually became vegan because I have a very deep spiritual practice
Hmm.
from India. And
Okay.
so part of that practice is to become vegan. And so that was the first aspect. It was also for health purposes as well. And I needed to do that, and I did it. And it works perfectly for me, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
But what also came with it as well is, there is a consciousness, I think, that we now have in the world, which is that we're recognizing that, and I also want to preface, I'm not an activist as a vegan. I'm not interested in that. I'm not involved in it.
Mm.
It's for my own purposes only, and I'm very vocal about that. But the reality is, there is a consciousness that we have in the world today about the environment, and also, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide emissions that there are in the world.
Mm.
And a large component of that is cattle farming, and that can't be escaped because of the
Yeah.
emissions from the animals themselves. And then also there is the ethical side of it too. So from that standpoint, I align with that in trying to be more sustainable and respectful of the carbon footprint. But then also at the same time, it's a lifestyle choice, and that was how I got into that. My vibrational frequencies increased when I became vegan. My energy sphere, meditative practice became much more pronounced. I was able to have a much deeper meditation sessions,
Mm.
and be able to be more invested in my own body, especially with yoga as well, and those kinds of things.
Right.
And also, it was more for later, it became more for athletic purposes because I'm a competitive fencer.
I was going to ask
So,
you about that next,
right, exactly.
actually.
So,
Tell
yeah, I
us
brought that.
about that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so I used to fence when I was much younger,
Okay.
and then over the years, for various reasons, I stopped, and I became very unathletic up until the pandemic. And I had the stress of the pandemic caused me, and other things as well, caused me to have a pre-stroke. And so when I had
Mm.
my pre-stroke, then I woke up, and I changed everything about my life overnight. So one of the main things was immediately I started veganism. I went back to eating meat again. I was 230 pounds before the pandemic. I got down to 100, and I think it was 80 something I think it was between June and September of 2019 when I started to become vegan. Went
Mm.
back to eating meat again, went back up to 230 pounds
Oh,
very, very
gosh.
quickly. And
Yeah.
so then pandemic happened, and I had my pre-stroke, and then at that point I decided, no, I have to do this for myself. And that's the where I focus more on the sobriety, and I
Mm.
focus more on just regrafting my entire life. No caffeine, no alcohol, and then also no meat and dairy. So went completely vegan. The
Okay.
day I did that, I decided I was going to go back to competitive fencing. And so for that purpose, I started training with an Olympic fencing club in Philadelphia because I was living in Philadelphia during the pandemic. And so then I started training with a coach there for 2.5 years. And then I wrote to one of the Team USA coaches up in New York, and I said, I'd love to train with you. Will you take me on? And Alexi said, yes, I'll come and see me. I'll train you.
Cool.
And so then I spent a year and a half training with Alexi, and then I got to a point where I was representing Great Britain.
That's awesome.
And now I'm taking an athletic break because I do go into a new category at the end of this year. And I'll be in that category for 10 years. It's called the veteran category. And
Okay.
so that means it's just 1 year older, but it's a
Yeah.
decade older. And
Yeah.
so then So then I go into that category. And so then I'm focused on those world championships. And that's what I've been
Cool.
training myself for now. So that's how the vegan practice has sort of helped me athletically, anyway, at least. And that was another real core reason for getting into, veganism and being vegan.
Yeah, taking
Yeah,
care of yourself. I mean, yeah, the pandemic I think was rough on everybody. I'm not
sure.
surprised, you
Sure.
were like, you know what, we need to make some changes for the better. So speaking of vegan and speaking of the wine, and I'm a huge foodie,
Sure.
tell us and my audience what are some really good foods that pair well with two tuxedos that are vegan, like if you have a special recipe or anything like that. And then maybe some non vegan options for people that aren't vegan but
Sure.
are interested in pairing some cool recipes or foods with this wine.
Absolutely, it's great. I definitely with Sauvignon Blanc, it's always important because it's high acid as a grape to avoid
Yeah.
spice and
Oh, okay.
acidity. So anything with tomato, like pasta, etc., this doesn't go with.
Mm.
It's not that kind of wine, and that's standard across the board in all food and wine pairing. So for anybody I see who's not vegan, I'm going to start with the non-vegan items
Okay.
first. It's going into the summer. Oysters,
Mhm.
mussels, moule marinière with a really nice. I would do if I ate mules. Okay, I would do mine with coconut milk, like
Ooh,
Thai coconut milk, so it's creamier and denser.
yum.
Actually, there was a place in Mystic, Connecticut. I had this, and it was the Oyster Club in Mystic, Connecticut, and they did it
Wow.
lemongrass with
Yeah.
coconut milk, but it was Thai coconut milk and fresh caught mussels from
Amazing. And some
I
crusty
forget
bread.
exactly where it was exactly, but it was fresh,
Yes.
literally right from there in Mystic, Connecticut.
Wow.
And crusty focaccia. They actually toasted
Yes.
focaccia and did it. And it was really nice.
Dip in it. Yeah,
So
that's the
yeah, that
best.
was beautiful. This is definitely more of a Middle Eastern cuisine oriented food. So and Greek as
Right.
well. So
Okay.
tzatziki, meze, hummus, those kinds of things. Israeli cuisine, tabbouleh, really nice baba ganoush,
Yeah.
Israeli hummus. This pita bread, this is the kind of food that you have Sauvignon Blanc with. So because it
Yeah.
cuts through the creaminess and the fat. And the general rule of thumb with, and you know this, Christine, so this is more your domain.
This is for,
But
everybody.
with food and wine pairing, the more fat that you have, or the more cream, the more acid that you need. But you also want to balance the body of the wine with the body of the food.
Right.
The more tannin in the wine, the more protein you need. Obviously, with
Right.
the entree, whether it's
Steak
a
and red
steak,
wine. Yes.
exactly. And then when it comes to steak, obviously, less sinewy, less I'd say, marbling on that front. So basically, ribeye is great with Cabernet Sauvignon. Filet
Yeah.
mignon is great with Pinot Noir, Burgundy
Yeah.
Pinot Noir,
Yeah.
something lighter with more acidity, but complexity as well. And then obviously things like, flat iron steak is good with Syrah, or good Creux-Hermitage from the Rhone Valley, or
Yeah.
Chateauneuf-du-Pape, because of the marbling, the chewiness. There's more tannin in the Chateauneuf-du-Pape and the Creux-Hermitage in order to actually break down the protein in the meat. But this definitely goes with that. I would say things like, so what I do myself anyway, at least, I eat a lot of Middle Eastern style cuisine as a vegan. It's very, very good. Guacamole, this is beautiful with
Wow.
guacamole.
Okay.
So, but nachos, guacamole,
Who needs a margarita?
crudité, exactly, exactly.
Love to try that one. I'm
It's
excited about
very
that.
elegant. I am a big
Okay.
fan of Japanese cuisine. Why? Because I was the head sommelier at Zuma in London in Knightsbridge. So Japanese cuisine, Zuma informed my haute cuisine, haute gastronomie focus. It informed how I thought about food and wine because I was pairing wine with one of the most difficult cuisines in the world to pair with. And now this is like 20 years later. So 20 years ago, when you were being asked to pair unagi, for example, with anything, it's almost impossible because the only way you could go was Auslese Riesling from Rheinhessen in Germany. And it was too sweet and it would kill the flavors. And you mentioned at the top of this podcast that you did a tasting, a pairing with port and Stilton, which is a wonderful, very English, because obviously
So
port has
good.
an English lineage.
Yeah.
Is a wonderful English lineage behind and the heritage behind Stilton cheese, the way it's made. It's a classic British emblem. That's what you have
Okay.
during the holidays. Is always you have the cheese board and you have crackers, and
Yeah.
that's how you pair the two together. But then something like port obviously makes a lot of sense because of how bright it is, especially ruby port.
Mm-hmm.
Tawny, not so much, but ruby definitely with Stilton. That's the way that
Yes.
goes. With Japanese
So good.
cuisine, what's very, very interesting is it's so savory, but it's also so alkali as well. And there's a lot of iodine. So that naturally clashes with wine.
Mm.
It's a natural no-no. However, you have to have the right amount of acidity, the right amount of sugar, residual sugar, and the right amount of aromatic and body, to complement everything. So in this case, rather than talking about just sushi, which is what everybody knows, from Japan, we're talking about sashimi in more depth and detail.
Mm.
Toro and ottoro, which are it's fatty tuna, which is the bluefin, and then yellowfin, right? So this actually works better with fatty tuna.
Okay.
Bluefin obviously is not so sustainable, but when you can get it at good, omakase restaurants, essentially 2 tuxedos, or even just with a very, very nice fatty tuna sashimi piece, that is exactly the way to go with 2 tuxedos, because the acidity and the aromatic, structure, anyway, at least of the wine, the body of the wine as well, although it's not as full bodied as Chardonnay, it's not supposed to be. The nice thing about it is it doesn't have the creaminess from the
Right.
malolactic fermentation that Chardonnay usually goes under. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a creaminess in the actual the fish, in the fatty tuna on the palate, and also a creaminess from the wine, which clashes. You have creaminess from the fatty tuna and mineral acidity, which cuts right through it and,
Yes.
and breaks it right down on that front.
Which is why I think they gave us the potato chips and the fried chicken to go with the champagne.
Champagne, exactly. Yeah.
Same concept. The
Yes,
acidity
exactly.
and the fat, it cuts each other, and it's a beautiful pairing.
Absolutely,
It's a
yeah.
delicious, unexpected, thing. So,
And
all
also,
right.
other things as well, like things like if you look at Thai cuisine, that's a very, very good example also.
Yes.
Anything that has a little bit more fruit and, that kind of component, it's a little bit more brighter. Also, things like carpaccios as well,
Oh, okay.
and scallops. Scallops, this is
Yeah.
beautiful with, on that front too.
Yes.
But anyway, there's plenty of
I was going to say, I'm
food
coming
for
up with so
thought.
many ideas. I can't wait to get the wine because I know it's on the way and I can't wait to try it. And I need to make some
Yes.
recipes. The scallops idea, I'm loving.
Scallops, yeah, would be very, very
I may
nice.
have to just come up with a recipe once I get this wine and I will post it for sure. And I can't
Perfect.
wait to try it.
Perfect.
So I know we're running a little bit out of time, but I do have a couple of quick fire questions for you.
Yes.
So is there anything else you want to say before we get into that and kind of do our closing, though?
No, I think the only thing is that the project's being wrapped up naturally because,
Okay.
and we sort of briefly touched on that, but now, when Tora passed, in last year, the dynamic duo were no longer a duo. It's
Yeah.
just Morris,
Yeah.
And so at this point now, that's where I've decided I don't want to continue the brand thereafter. There's some
Right.
other ideas in the works. And that's going to be away from alcohol beverage, but in other areas. So Morris and Toro will still be immortalized in that
Yeah.
front. They'll have a continuance, but
I'll be with you in spirit.
yes, exactly. And they'll be out there. But no, in terms of an alcohol product and as an alcohol project, that's winding itself down now.
Okay. And so I want to just do a couple little quick questions.
Please.
So, what do you feel is the most underrated grape?
Gewürztraminer.
Do you know we have that up here in upstate New York?
Yes, you do. Yes.
Dr. Frank. My whole family's
Yes,
German.
Dr. Frank. Yep.
And Dr. Frank has a really, really delicious, Gewürztraminer. And we used to serve that at Thanksgiving quite a bit.
Wow.
With my family because it is a little bit of a sweeter wine, which I'm not a big sweet wine person, but I also love dry Riesling too. Let's see. What do you think is harder, entrepreneurship or the reinvention portion of it in your life?
I think the two are synonymous with each other. I think growth as an entrepreneur is synonymous with the ability to be able to reinvent oneself in real time, and also take accountability for decisions that are made that may not have been made with the best judgment, but to remember that everything is liquid. So the growth aspect is liquid, business is liquid, and our instruments as human beings are liquid as well. I think that that's all intertwined. More specifically, in answer to the question, I think that what is harder, I don't think entrepreneurship is hard. I think there are people who who become entrepreneurs who are not entrepreneurs. And I
Right.
think that's why they struggle. I've been knocking on doors since I was 17 years old. So for me, it's not hard. That's just what I do.
Right.
And I do it in all aspects of daily life, and not bad at it. But there's many who struggle with that aspect. So, and that is a huge component of being an entrepreneur.
I agree.
Reinventing oneself is the hardest part. When a concept doesn't work, when investors want out, when, something happens like a pandemic or the Suez Canal crisis or the first wave of tariffs. And I'm prefacing this because I have gone through all of these trials and
Mm-hmm.
tribulations.
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening is, especially in the importation side of the wine business, it's a controlled product, it's a controlled substance. So you can't just make a change to the price.
Yeah.
All of this is nationally price posted, and then it's also on a state level price posted. It takes a couple of months for new pricing to be implemented. There's also margins that importers have to eat. When the freight companies, for example, increase their prices, before the pandemic, a 20-foot container used to be $2,500. A 40-foot container was $2,600, $5,500. But when the pandemic happened, if we actually wanted product to set sail, it was $10,000 per container.
Mm.
So, you can't pass this on to your customers very, very
Right.
easily. You have to absorb the deficit, absorb the expense, and then unfortunately just continue in business. And that's exactly what happened at multiple different stages over the last 6 years, since the first wave of tariffs were introduced, to then the pandemic, to then the entire alcohol beverage industry being shaken up and regrafted,
Mm-hmm.
to then going to the Suez Canal in 2021. Do you remember the big ship got stuck in the Suez Canal?
Yes.
It was like $30 billion worth of trade was being lost every day
Oh
or
my
something
gosh.
ridiculous like that. So, when that happened, shipping prices increased. And again, we had containers that were on the water, and the shipping companies had no idea what the final destination price was going to be.
Yeah.
So, went from 2,500 because prices had gone down again to $9,500 on arrival. And so, the constant pivoting back and forth, ping ponging that was going on at that time, a volatile time, as the industry was trying to reset itself and then regenerate, was very, very hard.
Yeah.
At the same time, conversely, rebuilding oneself and moving forward with confidence, not giving up, and also being, sure and steadfast on that front, that you can see those hard times, that it's a pendulum, that the swing will come back in one's favor again. That takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of focus. And I think that as an entrepreneur, you have to have some kind of spiritual practice, religious practice, or faith or belief to be able to navigate through those turbulent times. For me, that's what I had. And that was what I was able to lead with. If I didn't have that, I know that I would have been, literally a pinball in a pinball arcade machine, not knowing where I was going to go, or where I was going to end up, being at. So faith grounds you, having good people around you as well that believe in you and also love you and that care for you.
Yes.
That's something that I'll openly be honest about. I didn't have at that time when I was starting my business. And so when I pushed forward, I was really, really having to leverage lots of deficits for myself, but also push myself forward and remember that I had a goal and that I was moving forward in the right direction and that I was going to accomplish that goal no matter what. And that's taken a lot of strength. And along the way, other things like having a competitive sport. As a man, it's very, very important to have that, to be able to just be rational and be calm and ground oneself. And I think that's very, very important, whether it's boxing, whether it's tennis, whether it's, fencing, taekwondo, whatever it happens to be, having something that your whole body is engaged in and is able to just, to experience and compete against. That's very, very important in transferring over into business as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not only profit margins that you're in direct competition with, but you actually have something else outside of that that can relieve stress and also mitigate that kind of competitiveness. But there's lots of different factors. I think that being an entrepreneur is relatively easy if one knows how to knock on doors and has a vision for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's all really good advice. And, I mean, we've all been through ups and downs, and especially
Sure.
the pandemic. I mean, I was living in Florida at the time and came up for the holidays to visit my family. Ended up getting stuck here, for 6 or 8 months, and there was no work, and I wasn't from New York anymore. So I couldn't even get unemployment. So, that was a scary time. But like
Sure. Yeah.
eventually, I got my business back. I mean, it all worked out. But I agree. I think it's important to have healthy practices for your body,
100%.
exercise, what you're eating, having friends and family. And even if they're not near you, like when I was living in Texas, I didn't really have family at all. And a few friends that I had met, but it was hard. I mean, I had the people I was working with down there, but, there's so many things, to becoming an entrepreneur. Like you said, I think maybe a lot of people want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't realize that it's not always going to be wine and roses. You're going to
Sure.
have hard times, you're going to have good times, and you have to put yourself out there. Like you said, knocking on doors. My first job out of college, I was doing a sales job, like door to door promotional sales. And I only did that so I could move to Atlanta and tell my parents I had a job. But the one thing I learned was don't take, sometimes you got to take no for an answer, but don't let the bad days get you down, and you got to keep going and just
Sure.
keep your vision and it is okay to reinvent yourself. I've reinvented myself at least 10 times. I've
Absolutely.
been
Yeah.
graphic designer, doing a podcast. Now I'm a food stylist. Not, but they're all related somehow. But I think, yeah, having that vision and not giving up and being passionate about what you're doing is huge. And I love that,
Absolutely.
you follow that too, because that's what I believe in. And I think, yeah, that's really good advice for anyone that wants to get into the wine business, the food business, just be an entrepreneur. I guess what,
The last thing I was
oh, go
gonna
ahead.
mention there, Kristen, was actually just in terms of the two tuxedos and where to find it. That was
Yes.
another important point. Yeah, exactly. So
Yes.
yeah, so if anybody is interested in purchasing a bottle or so, they can contact us through the website and then let us know where they are locally, and we can direct them to their nearest retailers,
Yes.
where the product is available.
Yes. Instagram.
Twotuxedoswine.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I will post all the links below to your Instagram, the website, all that good stuff. And yeah, I can't even wait to try it. And I can't wait to see you. And I'm going to New York in about a month or so. So I'll be there
Great.
to meet
Fantastic.
you and see my friends and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for being on the show today. And
Thank you.
I'm sure my listeners will all be inspired to hear your story and excited to try out your wine, as am I. So thank you again. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Kristen. Lovely to
All
meet
right.
you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on Unfiltered today, part of the Artful Gourmet podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend, leave a rating or review, and make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Your support helps these conversations reach more listeners who are passionate about creativity, culture, and meaningful work. I'm Kristen Hess, and I'll see you next time for another great conversation right here on Unfiltered on the Artful Gourmet podcast. And remember, stay curious, stay creative, and keep living life a little unfiltered.